namaste.
Namaste.
As I rang the bell, I just remembered an old Monty Python joke, but it's probably not appropriate.
So you'll tell it anyway.
What's brown and sounds like a bell?
What's brown and sounds like a bell?
Dung. It's bad.
Not even.
No. It's British humor. You know.
Nope.
There's, I should confess that one of the first self-help / psychology books I ever read was Eric Berne's Games People Play, which is where the first reading is drawn from. And Eric Berne was a psychologist who was the founder of a school of analysis he called transactional analysis, which posited that every human interaction is essentially a transaction. I do something, you do something in return, and that can be healthy or not. And then he further analyzed the common games that people bring into those transactions, and that's the title of his book. And what really resonated in me when I read it the first time is that I saw, when I read about these games, a lot of people that played these games. I mean, I had friends, I had family members. And then when I read this gospel, I said, what is this in transactional analysis? What if we tried to look at what's going on here with a lens towards this idea that every human interaction is a transaction? And it really is, I think, helpful. How does it go? There's an old saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth leaves the whole world blind and something.
Toothless? Yeah.
Toothless, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a few sources saying.
Yeah, which is, probably true. But an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is Eric Berne's, now I've got you, USOP. Now that you've done this, I get to do this. And in his plumber example, the book kind of shows that it was written in the early 70s because you can't get a plumber to do anything for $400 anymore. But you might throw zeros in the end and say 4,000 and 40,000. And then Jesus continues. And it's interesting that in so many of Jesus' teachings, there are really two levels at which you can understand them. You can understand them at surface value through the lens of 21st century. And most of the time it's okay. Or you can get underneath them by appreciating the culture of his time. So a lot of people come away from this idea, do not resist an evildoer, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well, which will leave the whole world blind and toothless and naked. But
No one would notice that anybody's naked then.
that's true.
And through his cheeks.
And bruised cheeks. All four of them. Give to anyone who begs from you. Do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. It's really a story about power. It's not a story that says people who follow Jesus ought to be doormats and play Eric Berne's game, why does this always happen to me? Because if you find yourself saying, why does this always happen to me? It's a pretty good indication that you are doing something to put yourself in a position for this to always happen. And what the Jewish people of Jesus' time were living under was, of course, Roman occupation. And to be struck on the right cheek, I know we've talked about this before, but to be struck on the right cheek was to be backhanded, because most of the world is right-handed. And the only way as a right-handed person I can strike your right cheek is to backhand, which is what Roman soldiers did to Jewish people. It wasn't just a matter of being hit, it was a matter of being degraded. Now, if I get hit on the right cheek, I feel like Jethro's. And I turn my left to the oppressor. The only way that he can hit me now is either open-handed or with a fist. He can't backhand. And what that meant in the culture at the time is that we were now equals. So, in truth, by doing that, in all likelihood, you've done something that would cause the soldier not to strike you. It's the same kind of transaction with the coat. The soldier had the right to take the coat. But if the citizen gave the cloak as well, now the soldier was indebted to the citizen. The soldier had the right to make anybody carry their pack for 1 mile. Or however they measured things, It wasn't a metric system. And yet if the person carried the things willingly another mile, now the oppressor was indebted to them. And so it's an excellent example, although I'm sure Jesus didn't intend it this way, of how Eric Berne looked at relationships as transactions. If I do this, you're going to respond this way. Now, in a healthy relationship among healthy people, everything's fine. Somebody says, hey, would you mind getting me a soda out of the fridge? And if the person I ask that of doesn't mind getting it, they just go get it. If maybe they're really sore that day and they're having trouble getting in and out of the chair, they say, no, I'm really having trouble getting in and out of the chair, then I have to decide, do I ask somebody else, do I get it myself? But it's all very healthy, it's all very, it's not at all manipulative. On the other hand, if I go, oh, I just can't get up. Will somebody get me a soda? Okay, that's not healthy, it's manipulative, it's not above board, but we see it all the time. And in fact, it occurred to me as I was listening to Liz read the interaction with the plumber, that this is exactly how some people do business. Some people with bad hair. And we've heard the stories about how the strategy in doing business in contemporary culture is, I contract with you to do something, you do it, and I start complaining about how well it's done, in hopes, not because it isn't well done, but in hopes of getting a concession of the price. And then if I happen to find one little problem, I assert that I now have the right not just to get an adjustment on whatever the problem is, but I don't have to pay you at all. And of course, that's the epitome of unhealthiness. And the normal consequence is that sooner or later, nobody's going to come fix your toilet, which can be terribly inconvenient. Therein is the key, I think, to understanding love your enemy. Somebody once said, somebody used to work with Aaron actually, said feelings are not for business. Feelings are for at home. And I think
Very healthy in a hospice environment.
well, but he wasn't talking, this was an MBA kind of guy. This wasn't a caregiver. So, and I think he's right. I think feelings aren't for loving our enemies. Loving our enemies is a decision. Loving our enemies, from the perspective of Scott Peck, is wanting them to come to spiritual wholeness. And I don't need to like somebody to want them to come to wholeness. In fact, on a very easy, a simple level, a very basic level, it's probably to my advantage to want them to come to wholeness, because when they come to wholeness, they're going to relate to other people in a healthy way. And we get wrapped up in, but Bobby stole my sandwich in the 4th grade in the lunchroom, and have a hard time letting go of it. And this is one of the places, I think, where Eastern spirituality can really help us, because the idea of the present moment and the conscious recognition that what's happened has happened. But right in this moment, I do carry some stuff from that. And I do need to address that. But that's different than retribution. And when I go to address it, I need to address it forthright. You know, if I keep trying to, I don't know if I've ever brought this up here or not, I brought it up with somebody recently. There was a game when I was in high school where you'd scratch somebody right here, and just lightly with your fingernail. And eventually when you do that, for some reason you don't really feel that it's happening, but you develop quite a raw spot. And the powers that be decided that this was absolutely unacceptable. And so what they started doing was punishing the people who they found with raw spots.
But if you had a kitchen mishap.
Right. And moreover, yeah, they were punishing the victim, although the victim in this case was willing. But they didn't know who had scratched it. But they wanted to stop it. So rather than having a conversation about why this was probably not a really good idea, or ignoring it and just letting the behavior extinguish and the fad run out, they didn't understand the dynamic and made it worse. Because now it was a badge of honor to have one of those and get in trouble. Now, I was a little bit of a pain whip, and at the time, and I confess, I never let anybody do that to me. But it wasn't because I was afraid of being punished. Think of how much easier life would be if somebody said to you, maybe, hey, do you want to go to the movies? And you didn't want to go to the movies because you knew that when you went to the movies with this person afterwards, you always had to stop at a certain place that you really hated. And instead of saying to them, well, I'd love to go to the movies, but I really don't want to stop, at that place. We come up with some other reason, or we provoke a fight, or I think healthy spirituality always draws us to, I think Scott Peck's right, to spiritual wholeness. And I would say even to personal wholeness, body, mind, spirit. And the only way to get there is honesty. And the other trick is, the only way to get there is not accepting stuff that isn't ours. And those things are much more complicated than we imagine. Thoughts? Well, it's kind of like, I used to teach people, this is my Zen teachings, it has the word shit. Whose shit is that? It plays out, it's a little gross, but it plays out best. If somebody comes up to you and says, look, there's some shit on the floor. I want you to clean it up. If it's not yours, or your dog's,
Yeah.
you're going to say, no, I'm not cleaning that. I'm not cleaning that shit up. That's not my shit. But emotionally, they throw their emotional shit on the floor and say, look what you made me do. And sorry, they didn't make anybody do anything. And that emotional shit may or may not be ours. We don't have to pick it up.
It's hard sometimes.
What's that?
It's hard sometimes to not pick up someone else's emotional shit. Because it means that they feel guilt or shame that you should.
So then you ask yourself, whose shit is this anyway?
You know it's theirs. Sometimes.
Well, if you know it's theirs right away, then you say,
Sometimes it's easier though than feeling the guilt they try to throw on you.
That's
short or long term?
shit.
Hmm?
But the guilt is also part of the
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the question then becomes, what's in me that makes me susceptible? What am I allowing myself to believe about me? And where do I need to grow?
Because a lot of it goes back to childhood.
Yeah. Very much so.
We're
Insidious.
conditioned. And our survival depends on believing we're much more powerful than we are. If I just do the right thing, everything will be okay. And then, Uncle Fred won't get drunk at Christmas, or whatever. But we carry that into adulthood, and now we don't realize that we're not that powerful. We never were.
Yeah, I'm gonna be vulnerable. Because as I was read about manipulative and all of this, and even as I was sort of praying, okay, help me to see. I know that my family of origin was manipulative. My mother loved to, triangulate and all of that. And so I suspect there's some carefully learned behaviors.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'm wondering about is situations where I've done and anticipated needs or whatever, and then I ask someone that I've been, caring for, could you do this thing for me? And my tendency is to want to say, when I get the least bit of resistance, because I've just this, and this. And I'm being honest with myself, that's being manipulative.
I think it's part of what Jesus means when he says, lend without, what's it in here? Give to everyone who begs you and do not refuse anybody who wants to borrow from you. He's not saying be a financial fool. But if you give to somebody who wants to borrow from you, which is not lend, it's give, it's lending without expectation of repayment. So that if you are repaid, it's a pleasant surprise. And if you're not, pretty much the arrangement you expected going in, and we don't set ourselves up then for disappointment. And I think it also, in a practical way, forces us to look at, can I afford to lose this? Loan me $50,000. That's not an amount that I think too many people are going to go, yeah, if I don't get it back, it's okay. And I think you're right, it is conditioned. It is a lot of it is family of origin. A lot of it is, to use the S word that you used when you came in, it's people who passed along their shame onto us when we had to take it. And now we need to offload it. And not hopefully by giving it to somebody else. Can we say no? Somebody says, I need you to do this.
There's the power that comes with finally saying no. There is absolute liberation. There comes to finally saying no.
A great power. The waitress comes with your check and says, can I get you anything else? Say, would you paint my house? And watch the ease with which she says, no. Well,
You took my meal for free.
yeah, you want to pick up the check? But there are, in fact, recently we saw people when we were in Indiana. A guy who you knew came in complaining so that he wouldn't have to pay his check. Look at these muffins. What are you, the muffin man?
Do you know the Muffin Man?
Apparently he did. And it's unhealthy. And it leaves everybody angry or disappointed in themselves for not standing up. It's what lets bullies work.